I wanted to ask you actually because obviously you've gone through sort of various changes over the years in terms of your imagery and obviously in terms of you've always maintained the kind of industrial thing and the sound, but you've had a good career. You've toured all over the world. So what is your attitude to success? Because you're working, you're grafting, and a lot of people, a lot of young musicians are going to understand what it's like to have to work as well as trying to put out records. And I think that's one of the coolest things about you is that you're open to talking about that. So how do you feel about success, and does success mean to you now versus when you started?
Well, I mean, like when I started out, the goal was to just, you know, I think like everyone else, I was like, yeah, I want to be as big as possible, as sell as many records as possible. You know, everything, as much of everything as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I realized quickly, I mean, after a few years, I realized that the kind of music I do is never going to be household. I mean, that's just fucking unrealistic. Because it's mainly, it's always rooted in some sort of darkness, and most people don't necessarily connect with that. But, so, you kind of, you grow out of that, and by this stage of my life, I'm happy. To me, success is being able to hold on to your rights, and somehow be able to make a little bit of money off of it, and just sort of keep doing what you're doing, and some good feedback. I mean, that makes me happy now, and in that sense, I feel like I'm fairly successful. I mean, I still have to keep my day job and everything. I mean, I would love to not have to do that, but you got to stay realistic about it. So.
Yeah.
And I'm still here, which is fucking successful in itself. I never gave up,
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. One of my memories as a sort of growing up was watching like Parasite God and watching the video and stuff, and kind of that was like my gateway to industrial almost, and that kind of I went from that to Skinny Puppy and stuff like that. And I wanted to ask you how you look back on. Again, I'm not going to try and focus on the past too much, but how do you look back on that period of your musical life? Because you'd obviously gone from being in bands, and you've changed so much and developed so much. So how do you look back at sort of that period when you were, kind of you had this image and you had this kind of whole perception around you, and you were creating this music and sort of that, because it was a very successful period for you as well. You obviously were having a lot of attention. You were getting a lot of attention as well.
Yeah, I wish I had that now. One of the things that when I look back upon that time, I mean, it's with a lot of sort of split feelings, but on a positive end, and also slightly frustrating end, is all the attention I was getting at the time, which is very positive. What really bugs me is that I didn't quite understand the value of it back in those days. I think to some degree I took it for granted because, not necessarily 100% for granted, but I just thought, well, good. I'm glad this is happening, but I didn't understand the value of all that attention and all that sort of press coverage.
Yeah.
Which is too bad, because I think I would have done more with it if I did. But because I was signed with Eric at the time, and this was the second album I did with them. I did the Stargate before that. So like a lot of Eric bands at the time, and probably other labels too. But I mean, I don't know other labels. I knew Eric. The frustration was kicking in with the way that they kind of treated their bands and me, and you start realizing. By my second record, I started realizing that I'm kind of fucked in this deal.
Right.
So, because it just wasn't really a fair deal.
Yeah.
I don't care if you print that. It's just the truth. I can talk to them civilized today, and it's fine. But I mean, they know I'm not happy with the deal, and they know it's not a good deal. They can get whatever they want. David Pearson knows he's not giving people fair deals.
Yeah.
That's why it's still in business.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that overshadowed a little bit. The joy that I should have felt was a little bit. I think it was overshadowed slightly by the fact that I knew that I was working hard for other people.
Yes.
Yeah. So that also made it slightly difficult for me to really truly appreciate all the press coverage I was getting. Like I said, if I was getting that today, I would have been fucking over the moon. I'd be like, fucking hell, yeah. Because I own my stuff now,
Yeah.
So the value in that kind of attention from the press would have been absolutely unbelievable today.
Yeah.
Things are different, you know. There's no print mags anymore, and you know everybody's like, you go, well, if you want to be in our magazine, you know, you got to buy fucking advertisement
Yeah.
for like £4,000 or
Yeah.
something, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on. So now that I'm very much sort of a DIY independent artist, which in many ways is a good thing because I own my stuff and I actually earn more money now than I did back then, which is
Good.
fucking
That's cool. That's good.
outrageously fucking strange, you
Yeah.
know. But it's positive, you know. I sell way less records because I can't market myself the way I used to. But I see more cash, man. That's weird, right?
Yeah, it's nice though. It's good to hear. It's good for me to
It's very
hear.
nice. It's really nice, but it also puts things in perspective, like what things should have been like if my deals had been fair back
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
And that was a bit of my point. Then I wouldn't have had to have a day job, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could have done this, 24 hours a day, and I would have been able to put out more music and just be even more active, which would have been great for the fans too. They wouldn't have to wait long between albums.
I know, man. But I feel like you're still doing like I was looking. You got the US tour, and you've been around the UK a bunch of times, and you've obviously worked really hard to tour. So you are getting out there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. It's hard work, dude.
Yeah.
Hard work.
Oh, dude, absolutely, absolutely. One of the sort of it was the next question because I work with a lot of young people. I work with a lot of young musicians who maybe come from underprivileged backgrounds. Maybe they've they've been I work in a youth center, so like basically there's a lot of really talented musicians, and they've got a studio there, and they can write about their experiences, and then they can have access to people like myself who help them with marketing and things like that. But one of the things that people don't really talk about is how you manage touring and a day job and stuff. And you would be, because you're one of the only people I've spoken to in recent times, at least, that is open about having the day job and talking about it. And I wanted to ask you, how do you manage? Because you have such a strong image that you've developed and cultivated over the years, and a strong fan base. You know what I mean? People still listen to your music. They're listening to the older stuff. They're listening to the new stuff. So how is it? How do you manage the touring and the job and everything else? Because you're marketing yourself, you're cultivating your image still to this day. And how does that work? How do you do it? Not sleeping, I'm assuming.
To some degree, I mean, I do a lot of night shifts. Other days are just quiet. So you kind of catch up every time you have a little window of time when something can be done. The fucking smartphone comes out and that's our posting shit. And that's marketing to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just keep pushing. I'm sure some people are just fucking tired of seeing my fucking. Here's my web store. Here are my tour dates. Here's this. Here's that. But it's like fucking. What else am I gonna do? It's just the way you got to do it.
Absolutely, man.
So I think the smartphone is like it's like a tool for people like me, and probably a lot of those kids that you work with is just. Whip it out and use it. And I know a lot of like psychiatrists and stuff would not agree because people use that they stare at that screen all day as it is.
Yeah.
So because it kills your social life. So I guess it's contradictory for you to say that, but I mean in a work sense, I mean it's a brilliant tool. I mean if you're not working, then put it down. Do something and talk to somebody.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
That's the only thing I can think of, really, and on top of that, just have a fucking work ethic. Just don't be lazy, don't delay getting back on. If you get emails in regards to your music, fucking respond to them.
Absolutely.
And if you're not getting emails, then ask people where the fuck they are.
Yeah.
And, you haven't answered my email in 3 days. What the fuck is going on? I mean, are we going to do this or not? That's me. I'm very pushy.
Yeah. No, that makes.
I drive people fucking nuts, to be honest. So.
Well, that's being a musician and working, isn't it? Working as a musician, you know what I mean? So like.
Yeah.
That's...
I make long fucking lists of stuff that I should do, that I have to do, that I want to do. Just otherwise, if it's all up in your head, you're gonna forget half of it.
Absolutely, man. I mean, what?
I'm a big to-do list guy.
Big to-do list guy, yeah. I mean that again for me because I like I say in varying forms I've kind of kept in touch with your music over the years, and I feel like because you've toured the world and because you're still doing that. To me, like we said, that is success. What is left for you to do? What do you want to do? Because you've done live albums, you've done remix albums, you've toured, you've worked with some of the people you've always wanted to work with and stuff. You know what I mean? So like to me, I guess that's late. I'm not trying to sound like I'm lazy. Like I'm not saying you should be done now, but I'm saying like what is?
Saying I should retire.
Yeah, no, not quite. But like,
space for someone else.
yeah, what is left for you to do? What do you want to achieve?
I think just keep doing the same stuff. Really, I mean, I have a lot of ideas for music, and I mean, what I want to do right now is I'd really like to expand the live show a bit. Since I'm back doing this era one style of music, I mean, that's the best description I can give it.
Yeah.
It's really so it's back to being a solo artist, which means at the moment one guy on stage, and that can be a little empty.
Yeah.
So you got to build cool visual stuff around it, and I've started doing that. With like video projections and then some sort of stage props and things like that. So that's something I want to keep expanding on. At the same time, you need to expand your audience and all that stuff, and that's the hard part these days. Just getting out there and standing out. And Mortiis does that to a degree, with the image and the visual aspect of it. But Mortiis has always been kind of like musically a bit of a strange phenomenon. It's always kind of like changed and pulsated, so to speak, and you never quite know what direction it's going to take.
Absolutely.
So it's not a super commercial sound.
No.
So there's always a bit of like, I always felt like I had to market myself more than other people just to sort of like get into people's heads.
Yeah.
So that's still happening, and that's always going to happen, I think. So just keep doing it, hopefully it'll grow.
How did you find the differences in terms of your musical evolution when you had the mask on as Mortiis? Because I know you've been in bands before and you had but as Mortiis with the mask on and the mask off, was there any difference in terms of how you were perceived?
I don't really know how people perceive, because I don't always necessarily listen to people. Like I don't go searching my own name on the internet.
Yeah.
I did that when the internet launched. I guess that day everybody would search their name. Back in the Stone Ages. But ever since then, I've never really done that. I dropped the mask because at the time, the music, especially the lyrics, not so much the music itself, but like the lyrical content, the stuff that I was singing about, was just had become so removed from the otherworldly escapism, of the early Mortiis days, which was great in itself, but and the mask was just this fantastic thing to give that whole concept a face. But once I got into, to be honest, as far back as sort of the Smell of Rain, when I was starting to make really introverted, sort of introspective lyrics and started looking at my life, which I thought at the time was just a mess, and and it remained that way for a long time because on account of like all these sort of on and off depressions that I had, and I was struggling with a lot of mental issues and shit like that. So that was a way to ventilate and just almost like it was like this 15-year-long self-analysis that I did, in the industrial rock period, and so the mask didn't really have much of a place there. I mean, you could symbolically probably argue that it did, because it's like, well, it's a way to escape and not have people see you for who you are, which I think is an interesting idea. But I didn't think like that at the time. So the mask being there or not was always a reflection of where I was as an artist and as a person. That makes sense. I didn't go beyond that, and I didn't necessarily bother that much with what other people might think about that. I did see comments because I'm fairly active on social media, so once that stuff started happening, especially Facebook, where you can be more sort of interactive with people, and people leave comments, and so that I did notice like a bunch of like more like old timers, like some Southern European black metal guy or something like, I missed the mask in some like horrible English, and I'm like, oh fuck you too.
Yeah.
Screw you. I'm bearing my soul on this record, and you go like, I'm missing the mask. Like fuck you, man. So once you see that, you're just kind of like, I'm not gonna fucking bother with. I'm not gonna look at these comments. I mean, it's just gonna piss me off anyway. So, that's about as far as it goes for me in terms of bothering with what other people might, think about whether I have the mask or not.
That's good though, man. I think obviously you could probably run away with that. You know what I mean? If you focus too much on what people think, you know, you've got such a, you know, kind of a, I guess not necessarily a mystique, but like there's a whole image and a whole vibe around your music, which, you know, is its own thing. There's nothing else in the world quite like Mortiis. You know.
I think so too. And you know, even during the industrial rock period when Mortiis was a band. It wasn't like we didn't exactly look like Nirvana.
No, no.
You know, I fucking love Nirvana. I think that's the darkest stuff on the planet when that was happening. You know, I mean, if you look at Kurt Cobain's lyrics,
of course.
So he didn't need an image. He had eyeliner, I guess, but you know, I mean, we were still a very visual then. It was still like a shit ton of makeup and like, you know, we always wore these fucked up clothes and everything. So it was always about. I'm a big visual. I mean, my first memory in life is Gene Simmons on TV spitting blood. I mean, that's So I was branded immediately. I was marked, you know, like
of course,
the fucking best stuff of all time. So you know, I'll never do something that isn't visual.
I think
even if it has a mask or not.
Yeah, I figured that would be, you know, very, very important to you as well. And a couple more questions then. I did actually want to ask you about the, you know, touring again and just touring versus being in a band and touring on your own, because obviously, you know, there's a lot of stuff people don't see. You know, people see you playing all over the world and they're like, oh, it must be so cool being in Mortiis, you know, but you had a drummer. You know, you've had different iterations of the band, and I wanted to ask you again, how different is it? How much easier? What are the pros and cons of doing it era one versus that industrial rock era when you had a full band and touring as a full band and traveling and visas and all that bollocks? You know, like talk about the comparisons between the two.
You know, being a sort of a solo entity. I mean, I usually travel with one or two guys anyway, you know, just for merch and sort of state managing and stuff like that. I mean, I have done totally solo trips as well. It kind of depends on the budget of. I've done a lot of like flying out, do a show, fly back home, or fly out, do a couple of shows, fly back home.
Yeah.
So it kind of always boils down to the kind of money that's involved.
Yeah.
But you know, I can do this all on my own, but that is a bit more stressful because that means I get to set up the stage. I need to find someone to handle merchandise. I set up the merchandise. I do fucking everything. So you do a lot of running around, which is not that bad. I mean, as long as the rest of the fucking venue or club has their shit in order, and I don't get to deal with some technician that doesn't even have the necessary cables. You know, because that's a big waste of time. So you know. But that's okay. Usually, the thing about when you travel as a sort of like a solo act, there are really no arguments. I mean, I basically call all the shots, and the only person I need to discuss anything with is myself.
Yeah.
You know, so that's fairly liberating. That doesn't mean that there's always arguments within bands, but fairly inevitably, I think once you've been together for a few years, everybody gets very comfortable in their position. And some pretty strong opinions can start coming out, and that's when things start to rot a little bit. Because personally, I don't believe in democracy in bands, because then it's just going to pull in like 8 different fucking directions.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, you know, but I don't necessarily believe in dictatorships in bands. But I think somebody needs to have the last word, and there has to be like a sort of like, okay, we're going in this direction. This is going to be the way that we look. This is going to be our fucking sound. This is going to be the album cover. And I don't want to hear from the fucking drummer about him being pissed off because he's not on the album cover. I mean, I've had that. Like some guy nobody knows who is, and he wants to be on the fucking front cover.
Yeah.
And then you got to explain to him without him trying to punch you in the studio. I mean, I've been in these fucking situations where like, I'm sorry, dude, but nobody knows who you are right now. This is your first record that you're on.
Yeah.
You know,
Makes sense.
Next time around, they'll know who you are. We can talk about it. You know, there's all that shit, and it's such a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a waste of energy, and I think that begins the sort of rotting of the core of the friendship and sort of the structure of the band when people start having these thoughts and like, oh, fuck that Mortiis guy, he's such a dictator, I don't get to do anything in this band because I don't get to be on the front cover, blah, blah, blah. I mean, everything starts with these little bickering fucking arguments.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're at the airport and you're having these arguments really loudly. And that's when you realize, shit, my band's dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's human nature, right? I mean, everybody has an ego, and everybody wants to be, in the front.
Yes.
So
yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
But that said, I don't want it to sound like a negative thing being in a band. There can be a lot of fucking fun, because the thing is, once you've been together for a few years, you've been through a few scrapes and some crazy situations, which usually happens when you're on tour and the low budget stuff. I mean, weird stuff happens. You don't travel comfortably like fucking Mick Jagger and his guys.
No, yeah, no.
They're in a very safe zone. I mean, underground bands. I mean, they usually fend for themselves, so you kind of it can almost become like a little bit of a sort of Three Musketeers kind of situation where you kind of have each other's back sometimes. You get into fights and you fucking help each other out, and all these like little war stories that you share after a few years. So there's a bond there as well. So it can go in all directions.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just good. I think the reason why I ask these questions of you particularly is because I think it's good for people listening, especially young people, to realize that because what the perception of you is that you've toured everywhere, that you've got the image down, and which you do, but that you are successful. But it's good to know that even as a successful artist that's done all these things, that you still are aware of these struggles. You understand? So like, it's good for people to know that and to learn from.
Well, they're still there, man. I mean, not much has changed.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just that when you're fewer people, right now, like I said, if I travel with anybody, it's usually no more than one or two other people. I would just say it's slightly less chaotic.
Yeah.
And less arguing.
Yeah.
Which is very nice, because honestly, the arguing and the sort of quote unquote drama that can arise with like 4 or 5 guys traveling together, that can really wear you down.
Yeah, man. Oh, dude, absolutely.
There's nothing worse than being on tour with a couple of guys that don't like each other right now.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Awful.
I get it, man, for sure. I've been in a similar situation. But yeah, like when there's only 2 of my band, so like yeah, it's fucking stressful when you're in close quarters for sure. Before, so yeah, 2 more questions. One is about your inspirations, because one of the things I've always loved about, again, as you get this a lot, it's the visual stuff. You put so much thought into the covers, into the videos, into the clothes and the look, which like I say, I think it's a whole vibe. It's a brand. I feel like Mortiis has always been a bit of a brand. Rather than just a band or a musical platform. So what is it that inspires you outside of music? So think about like movies, could be games, could be people, specific places that you like to go for inspiration. Like when you get out of bed and you need some motivation, like what do you go to? Where do you find that?
The bottle.
Fair enough.
You said motivation.
I did, yeah.
No, I'm actually cutting down.
Good to know.
My wife told me you're not allowed to drink at home anymore, so that I'm over that. I don't have a problem. I'd like to point that out.
Don't worry about it, man. I've got you. Don't worry.
Honestly, I get that question a lot, and there's really no one fixed thing. I mean, yeah, I do a lot of this visual stuff. I think it just kind of pops up in my head sometimes, and other times I might just come across some completely random photo online. That's usually how it happens. I might be searching for one thing. I've been searching on stuff like, and this is very, very basic, like creepy forests, because I want to do something cool on stage, and I want to get some sort of reference photos. And usually what I try to look for in that instance is like how do theatrical stages, how do they build their stuff and make it look kind of cool, So you search for that kind of stuff, and then other slightly related images will show up, and it'll just be this like fucking awesome scarecrow, and I think that looks fucking great. Yeah. And I might just store that photo, or I'll just keep it in the back of my mind, and that might be something I could use later on. I don't think any of the things that I do are necessarily very original, but I try to incorporate it into the sort of Mortiis universe.
Yeah.
And become part of my look. I'll just think, okay, scarecrow. Well, maybe I could be a scarecrow. I almost did that, within a photo shoot. I had Mortiis become a scarecrow.
Yeah.
Which ended up with the straws coming out of the ups and all that stuff. You got to do it properly.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely.
so a lot of these are sort of like happy accidents. That's what I like to call them. And the same thing happens in music too. I can be fucking around with sounds, and then something completely unexpected happens, and you go, okay, I'm keeping that. Then you have this cool little sample, that you didn't plan on having, but it just, wow, that was awesome. Happy accidents.
Yeah, man.
I think the whole trick here is just always be observant. Keep that sort of hawk eye with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because everything's in the details. It can slip away in a second if you don't just sort of try to pay attention to what's happening.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I'm going to squeeze one in just after. So I've got a question about the new release. Obviously, we've got the Spirit of Rebellion to talk about briefly, but I do want to ask you about some advice because again, I think it's such a shame not to ask for a bit of advice for some young people, but we'll do that in a second. So we'll talk about Spirit of Rebellion. You've got the Era 1 sort of reimagining thing coming out and reinterpretation, which is cool. Obviously, you've always been a big advocate for remix albums and revamping, I guess, the stuff you've done for a modern twist. So is this the first step? What is the plan? So you got the Spirit of Rebellion coming out early 2020. Can you give me your plans as much as you can give me, I guess, as much as you can tell me for 2020? Because we're only a few fucking days away now.
Yeah, we are. The stress increases, as usual. Well, I mean, the immediate plan, obviously, is to have the album out, and then, on the same day of the release, I'm having the first show of the U.S. tour. I'm doing about 50 shows in the U.S. starting January 24th. So I'm kind of working towards that. I mean, I'm bringing a bit of a stage show over there, like props and stuff like that, and I actually still have to build some of it, because I do that in my garage.
That's awesome.
So
That's awesome, man.
Time for that, too. It's nothing complicated. It looks good on stage, So, I got that on my list, and I got some new music I'm working on, and I'm not really quite sure what direction it's going to take. For a long time now, I've been kind of playing with the idea of bringing one or two more people on stage to perform this type of sort of spiritual rebellion, that type of music.
Yep.
Because I think it would work great with like some percussion players,
sort of
like a female operatic vocalist, sort of like Sarah Jezebel Diva back in the old days.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've lost touch with her. I tried to talk to her about it, and then she just disappeared. So I don't know. I guess she's just not in the music business anymore. Or she's taking a time out.
Yeah, people.
She's got kids. So that might be it.
Yeah, people change, develop, man. It's all good.
Oh yeah. I mean, I hope she'll be back one day. But I mean, if she's focusing on other stuff like children, I mean, that is completely understandable. I have a couple of those myself. They take fucking time and energy. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, drive you crazy. So that's what I'm doing after this. There's some sort of school recital.
Oh man,
that's my rock and roll day.
Oh dude, but like I say, that's cool to hear. Like I say, I think it actually adds to the respect that people have for you, because you know it's not just a glitz and I know it sounds cliche, but it's not like a glitz and glamour lifestyle. You're not traveling like Mick Jagger. You are grafting. You are working hard.
It's never been. I mean, I've had for a second, I might have tasted like a quarter of what it might be like to be, a big rock star, sitting in a couple of limousines and hanging out with some big names. And I've done that stuff, but it lasts for like a second and you're back to familiar reality,
Yeah.
So that's fine, though. I mean, I don't really fucking care. I mean, I own my house, I have 2 cars, I have a fucking job, and I get to do this, and I have kids that are fucking healthy, I mean, it's not bad. You can't complain. Yeah,
to me, man, that's the dream. Like that is the dream. Like you get creative license. You have good people around you, and you get to live and exist, and that's cool as fuck. Like I know people that are in their 50s and 60s that don't own houses. You know what I mean? Because they've.
It's a hard world now, man. I mean, it's rough. It is weird.
Yeah, dude.
Europe's on fire. I mean, who knows what's fucking gonna how's this gonna end up? Who fucking knows? I don't want to make it political.
No. Well, it's I get that, man. But yeah, we're in some dark times, and you've got the soundtrack for it, which is cool as fuck.
Just rebellion.
Absolutely, man.
Trump would use that as his soundtrack. It'd be all wrong. I'd be like, no.
Yeah. Oh man, that'd be pretty fucking cool. Just want to. I'm gonna squeeze this in. I'm gonna squeeze it because I know you got to go. Like I say, I appreciate that. But again, because I want to get some advice from you for young people who, like I say, they've got maybe they've got part-time jobs. Maybe they can't go home. Maybe they don't have a supportive network around them. You know, they don't have the resources that, you know, perhaps you did, perhaps you didn't, but they don't have a lot of resources around them to support them. But maybe they do listen to Mortiis, maybe they listen to whatever other bands, and they need some kind of advice and support from someone that's been there and someone that's still doing it. What advice would you give to anybody coming up now, whether they're into industrial or whether they're into Dungeon Synth or whatever, you know, whatever genre, you know, whether they're into whatever they're doing? What advice would you give them to kind of keep them, if they want to make a dent, I guess, as you have been able to do?
You mean in the music world?
In the music world, yeah. Or I guess creative arts too. You know what I mean? The arts is yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, it's very cliche, but I mean, you know, just don't give up. I mean, it's the thing now, and especially in Dungeon Synth, I think is a kind of a good example. There's pretty much like an avalanche of these projects starting out. So I think it's easy to feel like you disappear or like you don't have good enough equipment or anything like that. I mean, the cool thing about Dungeon Synth is that it's actually based upon sort of lo-fi type of music. So if you sit there with a few, you know, VST plugins or whatever, you know, it's that I think that's probably fine. It's a good starting point.
Yeah.
And probably don't expect to make a lot of money immediately, or if that's your, you know, like on the cynical end of things. I mean, if that's what you kind of hope to do, don't be discouraged if it's not going to if that doesn't happen for a couple of years, because it probably won't. You know, Dungeon Synth, I don't know if that will ever become a commercial sort of genre. I'm one of the only ones I think that are able to make a couple of bucks out of it that I know about, and that's just because I've been around for 25 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, these things, they take time. They certainly do. And don't be discouraged if people start making fun of you, because some people won't. I mean, not everybody's going to like what you do, and especially not when you start out and you don't necessarily know all the tricks and how, you know, the recording techniques and whatever, and you know, to make it sound pleasing to most people. That's not easy. It takes fucking time. If you're able to hook up with someone else who has a little bit of maybe some production skills, that would probably help if you're able to do that. I mean, if people go to like youth clubs, there might be a studio.
There's a studio, yeah.
I mean, I never had that access to anybody, so I sat there on my own. But I mean, I was ridiculed throughout the entire 90s, you know. So because of my skills or lack of them, I guess you could probably say. So I kind of learned like a very hard way. For me, it was actually more of a mental struggle than anything else, which was to just sort of endure a lot of the fucking ridicule and the criticism that started kind of coming in, especially after I signed with Eric. But by that point, I was already getting a little bit established. I had a fan base, so that kind of kept me going, you know.
Yeah.
But stay strong and realistic. You know, don't expect the world after your first song.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. You know, but I mean, if you keep at it, then stuff will happen.
Absolutely, man. Thank you very much for sharing that with me tonight. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful holidays with your family, mate. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.